Welcome to our channel, Crime Loom, the place where true crime stories come alive. Between 1975 and 1980, fear spread across the north of England. Women felt unsafe walking alone at night. Families locked their doors earlier than usual, and newspapers printed daily updates about a mysterious killer. His name was Peter Sutcliffe, but the world would remember him as the Yorkshire Ripper. His crimes changed Britain forever and left deep scars in the cities of Yorkshire and beyond. Peter William Sutcliffe was born on June 2, 1946, in the town of Bingley in West Yorkshire. He grew up in a working-class family. His father, John, worked in a mill, and his mother, Kathleen, stayed at home to look after the children. Peter was a quiet and shy boy. Teachers said he was polite and never caused trouble, but he preferred to be alone. As he grew older, he became more withdrawn. He did not seem comfortable in social situations, especially around women. Some people thought he was just a bit odd, but nobody imagined he would one day become one of Britain's most feared killers. After leaving school, Peter worked several small jobs. He was a gravedigger for a while, which fascinated him more than most people found normal. Co-workers later said he seemed to enjoy being near graves, often talking about death in a strange, almost casual way. Later, he found work as a truck driver, a job that gave him long hours on the road and plenty of time alone. In 1974, he married a young woman named Sonia Surma. She was intelligent and independent, and she worked as a teacher. To their neighbors, the Sutcliffes looked like an ordinary couple. They lived in a small house in Bradford and appeared settled. Nobody suspected that inside Peter's mind, violent fantasies were already forming. The first signs of danger appeared in the mid-1970s. Peter began spending time in red light districts, areas where sex workers worked on the streets. He claimed he hated prostitution and believed women who sold sex were sinful. But he also seemed drawn to them, and this mix of anger and desire soon turned deadly. On a cold night in October 1975, 28-year-old Wilma McCann, a mother of 4, was walking home in Leeds after a night out. She never made it back. The next morning, her body was found on a playing field. She had been hit on the head and stabbed several times. Police were shocked by the brutality. At first, they thought it was an isolated case, but they were wrong. This was the beginning of a killing spree that would last 5 terrifying years. Only a few months later, in January 1976, another woman was attacked. Her name was Emily Jackson. She and her husband were struggling financially, and she had agreed to earn some extra money as a sex worker. Peter Sutcliffe picked her up in his car, drove her to a quiet spot, and killed her in a similar way. The police now realized a dangerous man was at large. Newspapers called him the Ripper, comparing him to the Victorian killer Jack the Ripper. The name stuck, and soon everyone was talking about the Yorkshire Ripper. Throughout 1976 and 1977, the murders continued. Most victims were attacked at night, often on lonely streets or wasteland. Many were sex workers, but not all. Sutcliffe used a hammer to hit his victims on the head and then stabbed them repeatedly. The attacks were fast, silent, and savage. Police formed a large task force, interviewing thousands of people, checking car records, and following every possible lead. But the killer seemed to vanish after every murder, leaving no clear evidence behind. The lack of progress frustrated the investigators and terrified the public. In 1977, the case took an even darker turn. The Ripper attacked women who were not sex workers, breaking the pattern that police had assumed. One of these victims was Jane MacDonald, a 16-year-old girl who was simply walking home after a night out with friends in Leeds. Her death shocked the nation. Newspapers asked why an innocent girl had to die before the police took the case seriously. For the first time, the idea that all women were at risk became clear. No one felt safe anymore. Women stopped going out alone. Taxi drivers refused to pick up female passengers after dark unless they were sure they were safe. Fear spread faster than any headline could capture. Under huge pressure, the police increased their efforts. More than 250 detectives worked on the case, and they interviewed over 250,000 people. The investigation became one of the biggest in British history. But the size of the operation made it harder to manage. Important clues were lost in piles of paperwork. Officers were overwhelmed, and small mistakes had big consequences. One major problem was a hoax that wasted years of police time. In 1978, detectives received letters and a tape from someone claiming to be the Yorkshire Ripper. The man had a strong Wearside accent from the Sunderland area. He taunted the police, saying they would never catch him. The voice became famous when it was played to the public in the hope that someone would recognize it. The hoaxer signed his letters, Wearside Jack. Because of this tape, police focused their search in the northeast of England, hundreds of miles away from where the real killer lived. They ignored suspects who did not have the same accent. Peter Sutcliffe was interviewed 9 times by police during the investigation, but each time he was dismissed because he was from the wrong area. The hoax completely misled the detectives. Years later, the man who made the fake tape was found and jailed, but by then, many more women had died. By 1979, the number of victims had grown. Some survived and gave descriptions of their attacker, but the information was inconsistent. The police files grew thicker, the evidence more confusing. Public anger increased. The government faced questions about how such a large investigation could fail for so long. The media reported every new murder with bold headlines and frightened stories. The Ripper had become a figure of horror, and the north of England lived under his shadow. Peter Sutcliffe continued to live his double life. By day, he was an ordinary man who worked hard and cared for his wife. Friends described him as friendly, even helpful. He fixed neighbors' cars and visited relatives. But at night, he prowled the streets in his car, looking for victims. He claimed later that he believed he was doing God's work, punishing prostitutes. It was a twisted belief that made his crimes even more disturbing. In 1980, Sutcliffe's violence escalated. His victims came from different backgrounds: students, shop assistants, and mothers. No one knew where he would strike next. The police launched undercover operations, using female officers as decoys, but the killer managed to avoid them. One of his last known victims was a young student named Jacqueline Hill, murdered in Leeds in November 1980. Her death caused outrage and despair. People demanded answers. The police knew they were running out of time. Then, in January 1981, chance finally ended the hunt. 2 police officers in Sheffield stopped a car because it had false license plates. The driver was Peter Sutcliffe. He was calm and polite, but something about him made the officers suspicious. They took him to the station for questioning. While he was being held, an officer discovered a hammer and knife hidden near the place where Sutcliffe had been stopped. When confronted, Sutcliffe suddenly confessed. He told the police everything, describing each attack in chilling detail. He said he had killed 13 women and tried to kill 7 others. The long nightmare was over, but the shock was only beginning. When the news broke, Britain was stunned. People could not believe that the quiet truck driver from Bradford was the Yorkshire Ripper. The police faced criticism for missing so many chances to catch him. During his trial in May 1981, Sutcliffe pleaded guilty to manslaughter on the grounds of diminished responsibility, claiming he was mentally ill. But the jury rejected that claim. He was found guilty of 13 murders and 7 attempted murders. The judge sentenced him to life in prison and said he should never be released. Sutcliffe was first sent to a high-security prison, then later transferred to Broadmoor Hospital, a psychiatric facility, after being diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia. For decades, he remained behind bars. In 2010, a high court ruling confirmed that he would spend the rest of his life in custody. He was later moved back to prison after doctors decided his condition had improved enough for him to leave the hospital. Peter Sutcliffe died in November 2020 at the age of 74 after contracting COVID-19 in prison. Many people felt relief that the man who had caused so much pain was finally gone. The story of the Yorkshire Ripper left deep marks on British society. It exposed serious problems in how police handled large investigations. In the 1970s, there were no computers to cross-check evidence, and many records were kept on paper cards. Important information was lost or forgotten. The case led to major reforms in police procedures and training. Investigators began to use new systems for storing and searching data, making it easier to find connections between crimes. The Ripper case became a lesson in how not to run an investigation. The crimes also changed how society viewed violence against women. For years, the media and even police had described the early victims as just prostitutes, as if their lives mattered less. Feminist groups protested, holding marches and vigils. One famous movement called Reclaim the Night began in Leeds during the Ripper years. Women demanded the right to walk safely after dark without fear. They argued that the focus should not be on controlling women's movements, but on stopping men from committing violence. These protests helped shift public attitudes and inspired future campaigns for women's safety. The families of the victims never fully recovered from their loss. Each woman had her own story: mothers, daughters, sisters, friends. Some were working late, others were simply walking home. Their lives were taken by a man who saw them as targets, not people. Over the years, documentaries, books, and films have tried to tell their stories, ensuring that they are remembered not just as victims of a killer, but as individuals who deserved better. The Yorkshire Ripper investigation also revealed how easily a hoax could mislead an entire police force. The Wareside Jack tape wasted precious years and allowed Sutcliffe to keep killing. It showed how public pressure and assumptions could cause investigators to make dangerous mistakes. Modern policing now uses psychological profiling, forensic science, and digital systems to avoid such errors. Lessons learned at a terrible cost. Even after his death, Peter Sutcliffe remains a symbol of horror and failure. Horror because of his cruelty, and failure because of how long it took to catch him. His crimes forced Britain to look at the way society treated women, the way the media shaped fear, and the way justice could be delayed by prejudice and error. For 5 long years, towns across Yorkshire lived in fear. The Ripper's shadow fell over everything: every empty street, every night bus, every woman walking home. But in the end, he was caught not by advanced science or secret intelligence, but by a simple traffic stop and the alertness of 2 ordinary police officers. His story reminds people that evil can hide in plain sight, and that sometimes the smallest action can bring justice at last. Today, decades later, the name Peter Sutcliffe still chills those who hear it. His crimes changed how Britain saw itself, a country forced to confront the darkness that can exist behind ordinary faces. But the memory of his victims endures too, stronger than the man who tried to erase them. Their stories, their lives, and the lessons learned from their deaths continue to shape how people think about safety, justice, and humanity. In the end, the story of Peter Sutcliffe is not only the story of a killer. It is also the story of a nation's fear, its mistakes, and its search for answers. It is a warning about how obsession, hatred, and prejudice can destroy lives, and how even in the darkest times, truth can still be found. Subscribe to Crime Loom, and join us as we unravel more heists, mysteries, and untold legends.